Welcome to Daily Armour. Today I'm in Romans chapter 10, looking at verse number 3. I had been studying and looking at some different passages, was preparing a list of lessons. I am preparing a list of lessons on salvation. And I knew I would be in Romans chapter 10 because that's where my previous pastor, Preacher James Lockie, he took me to Romans chapter 10, verses 9 through 13. And went through those verses with me whenever I was under conviction that Monday night that I got saved. And so I knew, as I was writing down all these scriptures, though I knew where I wanted to be, I knew I would be in Romans chapter 10. It's very, very special. Love that's where Preacher took me, because that was all I needed. I kind of clammed up. When I was under conviction, I kind of went into shock and was frozen. And as I was frozen, Preacher James Lockie, preacher, I just love him, but, and he's with the Lord now. He took me to Romans chapter 10, verses 9 through 13, and that's what it took to get me unstuck. I panicked. I was like, Preacher, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he took me to what to do. And then he says, you ask the Lord. Because that's all I needed to do. All I needed to do was take that next step and ask. Talk to the Lord about it. I froze in fear and reverence to the Lord. I was afraid to speak to the Lord. But Preacher took me right to where I needed to go. And as I was reading that yesterday, studying over several verses, several different places, salvation is throughout the scripture. I mean, you can go all the way back to Genesis, that God had the plan already in place. Before man ever even sinned, the plan was already in place, and he's revealing his plan way back in Genesis. But in saying that, I was reading through Romans chapter 10 and run across this verse number 3 and realized that that's what I looked like. That's what I was doing that time before I got saved. Let's get into verse number 3, and it says, for they, being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. That's what I was doing before I got saved. I was ignorant of his righteousness. What does ignorant mean? It simply means it's not trying to be derogatory. It's simply stating a fact that you don't have enough information, that you're lacking information, that there's some things that you don't know. There's some things that you are unaware of. There's some things that you needed to be made aware of. And so that just is talking about lacking knowledge, lacking information. And I lacked some information. I had been given the information over and over and over again. Physically, I was hearing it physically, but I wasn't comprehending it spiritually. But the difference was that Monday night, God was revealing it to me. He had the light bulb come on. He was the one making himself known to me. And then once I knew, I was exposed. The light went off. And once I knew, then I couldn't unknow it. Then the battle was absolutely raging and going crazy inside me. I was like, but Lord, but this, but that, and there's no buts about it. What was I doing with all those buts? I was establishing my own righteousness. I was saying, but Lord, I'm always at church, but Lord, I believe every word of the Bible, but Lord, I'm trying my best to do all those things Preacher says to not do, and I'm doing or not doing those things that Preacher says not do, and trying to do all those things that Preacher advises for us to do. If he tells us to read in a certain scripture, Lord, that's where I'm going to be reading. If he says that I need to be more active, be more this, Lord, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do all those things. Anything that I'm hearing physically, I'm trying to do all those things. I'm trying to be all those things. I'm studying, I'm praying, but Lord, I'm miserable. I'm miserable because that's what my own righteousness will still leave me miserable. It still leave me empty. It still leave me without peace. Still leaves me without hope. How do I know that? Because I look back and I remember the feeling that I felt every time Preacher Lockie would also say, is your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life? That would terrify me. I would be fine. I would be soaking up. I would be taking notes of the message, just soaking it all in, taking it all in, writing down all these facts, writing down all this information. And then all of a sudden, Preacher Lockie would say, "Is your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life?" And I would think, well, I think my name's there. I assume my name is there, but I don't know for sure. I had questions. I had doubts. I had fears. I didn't have peace. It made me nervous. And I would go back and I would like, well, I'm always at church as much as I can possibly be here. I mean, unless somebody's running a fever, a runny nose is not going to get my family out of church. I mean, saying I have a headache, that ain't going to get you out of church. I mean, I required my family, like, you let me check your temperature. It better be over 100 degrees or we're going. I mean, that's how diligent I was. And I was saying, Lord, this, that I've done. But, I was establishing my own righteousness. Look at verse number 3. For they being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, which is what I was doing. I was basing my righteousness. Well, I had felt like I should get baptized because I'd never been baptized. I had made a profession of faith when I was very young, and I thought, well, I've never been baptized, so I went, asked Preacher Lockie to baptize me, and he did. And then, I'm volunteering for everything that I can volunteer for. I am, I'm given to, the poor or to desperate situations or volunteering to work this position or that. I'm doing whatever that is asked or required. I'm volunteering, whatever. All of that is when I was establishing my own righteousness. And I was still looking and I was still seeking and I was still not feeling peace and not having much hope in that my name was written in that Lamb's Book of Life. Have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. So, for they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, which was what I was before I got saved, and going about to establish their own righteousness, which was when I was making all those excuses why I was probably okay, which was what I was saying to myself every time Preacher Lockie would say, "Is your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life?" I would be like, well, I've got this on my side and that and that and that and that, and I would have like 10 different things. That was me establishing my own righteousness. Have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. That's what I looked like before. But the difference that Monday night is a little bit more information was required. And God gave me that information that Monday night. Now, my spiritual eyes had been opened. I still had a choice to make. I still could decide to go with all those 10 things I could come up with why that I should be okay. Why that my righteousness would be good enough, but I couldn't get away from that. It had been revealed to me that it's not about what all I have done, but it's about what He's already what He's already done, what He's already established. It's about God's righteousness and what's going to be acceptable to God. It just popped in my head, and I just remembered that my little Sunday school lesson for my Sunday school class Sunday is about the offering of Cain and Abel. The offering that was offered, but one was accepted and one was rejected. One came from the man. It was what he produced. It was, I tilled that ground. I sowed that seed. I watered it. I pulled those weeds. I did this. I did that. And he offered of his bounty to the Lord. And the Lord's like, that's not going to be acceptable. What was he trying to do? He was trying to attain God's favor through himself. The other one, the other brother that offered, what he offered, he didn't do. He didn't have any part of producing this perfect little lamb, this perfect little offering. It was perfect. He didn't do that. He didn't birth that. That was something that God had blessed him with. And he took the best that he had, and he slew it and gave it to the Lord. Now, he could have hoarded it up for himself. He could have said, oh, well, I need this because I'll produce more just like this, and I'll be the best farmer, and I'll be the best herdsman, and I'll have the best of everything, and it's all about what I can give and what I can offer. But that's not what he did. He took that which had been given to him, that which was perfect, and he gave that back to God. And that was a picture of God's righteousness. God gave his son as a perfect, spotless lamb. It wasn't anything about, we didn't have any part of that. If we'd had part in it, we would have tainted it. We would have marred it. It would have had a mark against it. And Jesus didn't have any marks against him because it wasn't about man. It was the righteousness of God. It was God in flesh. He is God in flesh. Jesus was, is, and forever will be God in flesh. And that his way, his righteousness was the only way that my sin debt was going to get paid, or that your sin debt was going to get paid. And I had to make a choice that Monday night. Was I going to go with all these 10 things that I had, I'd come up with like 10 things. I don't know. I don't remember specifically, but I probably around 10 things that I could think of that I had done good, that I had done right. And I was trying to say, but Lord, but Lord, but Lord. And he was saying, but now you know that none of that's going to be accepted. That offering's not going to be accepted because it has to be perfect. And God's saying, but I have this that you can submit to. I have the blood of my son. He's saying that his son blood is perfect, and his son's righteousness he would accept because his son is him in flesh. It's God himself in flesh. And then the manhood, because man had to pay, then Jesus was that man for us that could pay, that was able to pay, because Jesus is also God. And so when he paid that sin debt for the sins of the world, then he paid that sin debt for me, because I'm of the world. I'm one of those whosoevers. And I had to submit to that Monday night. And I don't know if maybe you're listening and you are putting your faith and trust in your baptism, which I was baptized after I got saved. I had been baptized before I got saved. And then when I got saved, I was like, now that one didn't count. That was me trying to get to God. But now this is the obedience to the Lord. I was baptized. But I don't even remember what Sunday, like what was the date of that? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I know I submitted and I was baptized, but I'm not banking and basing my salvation on the day I got baptized. I am basing my salvation on what Jesus did for me. I asked him and he saved me. I had stopped putting my faith and trust in my attendance, my Bible reading, my Bible studying, my praying, my volunteer work, my tithing, my membership, my baptism. I may have repeated something. All these things that I could think of that were my excuses, was me trying to establish my own righteousness. I had to stop that Monday night. All of that had to stop. And it was revealed to me that I was still going to hell based on all that stuff. That stuff wasn't getting me to heaven. That stuff wasn't doing anything for my peace and my security, but only God's righteousness. And so that Monday night, it was revealed to me. God opened my spiritual eyes. I was blind before, not physically, but spiritually I was blind before. But now I can see, and I'm understanding that spiritually. But then I have to look at that word, submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. So before I had not submitted to the righteousness of God, but that Monday night, everything changed. I submitted that Monday night to the righteousness of God, to his righteousness. Not anything that I had done, nothing to the cross I bring, simply to the blood I cling. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.